So I wonder, maybe if the best place to start, Martin, is to ask you to summarize what you worked with Filtered over the past 18 months or so, what that looked like from end to end as a process, and then I'll drill into ask some specific questions on certain points of it.
Yeah, sure thing. So as part of my role in the Centre of Excellence for People Development, I took on skills and content from a strategic perspective, and had this situation where we had a skills framework which had been developed probably about 7 years ago, and hadn't really been looked at since then. We were just in the middle of deploying a new experience platform, and we had also just signed up for 3 huge content vendors with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of content, which came with it in multiple languages. And so the challenge was really how what do we need to do with all of that, and what did I need to do with it? And really the key kind of areas of focus were, first of all, how do I make sure that the skills framework is up to date and relevant? And I think the key focus for me there in terms of that is, what are people actually focusing on from a skills perspective? What do we want people to be focusing on from an organizational perspective on skills? And also, if that's now, what about future? So what do we want people to be focusing on, and what will people want to focus on from a skills perspective in the future as well? So after we got that piece of work done, it was then taking the thousands of pieces of content and figuring out what to do with that. And I always remember the first time I spoke actually to Filtered in the coffee house, and I think 2 nights before that, I'd spent 4 hours watching.
I always think of this, Martin, the big weekend or whatever it was, literally all weekend, you were just working with this massive spreadsheet with all of this content, like trying to map it.
10,000 lines of content, and I was clicking yes or no manually. That's dead serious. That was the initial approach, which obviously, which obviously wasn't sustainable from a mental health perspective. Let's put it that way. So needed to figure out a better way to do that, I think. And then really onward, what does that look like? How do we update it? How do we iterate it? How do we get better and make sure the relevant content is easily accessible by our people?
Yeah, and so the onward journey from there has been, as you said, to refresh that skill framework and make sure it's aligned and push it into the LXP solution there. And so, can you tell us, talk a bit more about any cost savings, or what benefits did you get? I mean, because arguably the spreadsheet process, I mean, would have made your life a misery, but maybe GSK would have put up with that. It was a fine. Well, it kind of ruined Martin's life for a few months, but he'll get it mapped and then it's done. So what's the ROI? What's the reason for bringing in some technology to try and approach that tagging prioritization problem?
Yeah, I mean, from a resourcing perspective and the people needed, it was a big saving in terms of the amount of time needed to be spent to achieve a much better outcome, actually, of the work and the tagging that we did. I think it was a couple of 100,000 when you look at the cost saving there. Also, when you look at the amount of content. So what became quite clear actually was I didn't need to pay for the volume of content that I was paying for. And I could actually go back and look at the contracts that we'd signed for the volume of content that we'd signed and look to do something a little bit different. So I think it was about 200,000 or 300,000 that we saved.
Wow. So I really like that. I'm interested as to how being able to apply your skill framework, not just a vendor skill frame, but your skill framework, as a lens helped with those conversations? You know, what was it like putting skills front and center when you're talking to content vendors, but also to the business as well? Because this must have made some kind of impact on how you were seen in the business and what you could do off the back of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives a very clear data-led frame of reference and discussion point. I think Mark mentioned it earlier on about when you have a conversation with data, the Jeff Bezos quote that he made. Actually, I kind of genuinely feel like I lived that a bit. And honestly, it's the first time I ever have done it. You know, I think historically in my L&D life, I've used data, but I don't believe I've used it as well as we did here. And being able to have a conversation to say, well, this is the skills framework, and this is why it is our skills framework, and this is why it's relevant. These are the data points that we used in terms of looking at what are people consuming, in terms of our 180 survey line manager feedback, in terms of external publications and what they're saying, focus groups, all the different data points that we used. It just gives real clarity. And if I think about you put two lenses on it there. In terms of working with vendors appreciate it, quite frankly, because you can actually say, these are the areas that we want to focus on. What can you deliver in right? And so it's easy for them. And some of them will say that, you know, actually that's not our area of strength. That's not for us. Some will say, yeah, great. And you can start making much better decisions on the right content vendors that you want to work with. From a stakeholder perspective, again, just makes it a lot easier to talk about why you're taking a particular direction, whether it be from a content vendor perspective or actually the skills that you've chosen.
There's something about vision, isn't there? Once you can see it, once something's out in the open and we can talk clearly, everyone benefits. Even if you know it's a harder conversation, it's better. So I know you need to leave us in a couple of minutes. So just to help steer the workshop version of this. Not everyone's sat on top of a story where they used some data to make some decisions and got some value. When we break up into smaller tables to discuss related examples, would you give any advice to the people around the room today about how they can start to use data with skills in this kind of way?
I think it's just, frankly, looking at what you've actually got available in your organization. That's honestly where I started. The big challenge I think we all have is data is still really, really difficult to pull. So what actual tangible data points have you got that you can use, and what one or two or three can you use to support whatever piece of work you're doing? Great.
I think that's a really awesome closing piece of advice. So thanks so much, Martin, for your time and sharing that story with everyone. I really appreciate it. There's a quick question. Is it fair to ask him to answer it? Yeah, Martin, are you using search data? You've seen it. It's popped up. You can't get away from it. Are you using search data to inform your skills framework?
We did. I think it's become more important now than it was when we initially did the piece of work, because we had quite a new platform. But I think it's one data point out of many. So what else does that sit alongside?